before. Okay. Welcome to the CTO studio, Kevin, Ashley.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know both of you. I think I've known Kevin slightly longer through just chit-chatting. Ashley just announced his arrival to San Diego, and I couldn't resist. And then I found out when, I don't know what happened. Did the two of you tell each other about me and then you've closed the loop, or?
No, I think I had some post that I cross-posted, and somebody, gave me some grief about cross-posting, and I was like, hey, it's different groups, and there's content in here that I don't get in there, and there's room for us to share our wisdom in every forum, right? And then Kevin messaged me and was like, oh, so you're actually down there doing that thing, and I know Etienne, and what do you think? And I was like, oh, well, you got to at least join the community calls.
Oh, man. You said that to Kevin?
I did. I said he literally asked me, is there added value, right? And I said, are you kidding me? I get a ton of value out of this community, and being part of it is important to me. So
years and years and years of doing this now, I still crave those little moments of validation, because I still think I'm wasting everyone's time, and I'm in a rat race to try and grab attention, make connections, add value. I mean, time is, especially at this level, it's impossible to lock down.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people can take for granted the connections that they build and the advice that they can get in other forums. But the problem for most people is they're in a selling mode. They have an objective from the relationship. And what I get by being open, and in both of these communities and more, hopefully in the future, is I learn stuff. So I'm just like, oh, really? Okay. That's how you do it? I don't know if I like that way, but that's okay. I want to hear how other people are doing stuff. So.
And that is probably one of the number one reasons people do reach out to me, is they feel like they just don't know what's going on. What's going on with the CTO that's 2 doors away from me, but I never talk to them, and I don't know what's going on.
And
Thank you, Kevin.
Just time is a challenge, right? So just the number of things we have to do outside the job just to stay current is always a problem. And so then it's just, okay, well, I'm working 50 or 60 hours a week sometimes, and then I've got everything that isn't the job, but I also know that I need to continue to sharpen the saw and build my network and all those other kinds of things. So it's more that, with the time I have, how do I spend it across, how much do I invest in this community? How much do I invest in that community? How much do I invest in just my own research and those kinds of things? It's a challenge.
I think it's a shorthand for decision-making too, right? For me, this really comes down to, I get exhausted from making decisions, and I try to make my team make a lot of decisions. I try to give them the autonomy to do that, but I also need to be there to support them. So with a group of people that for many years, and you see them go from job to job, and you see them succeed and have other team members that also succeed from under them, I think it's not an accident that Kevin and I have worked together before, and we find ourselves in the same community.
Yeah.
And if Kevin says, just use Avalara, that's enough. I don't have to now do any more research on, should I find a SaaS product to do tax management software? Should I build it? Someone I trusted said, just do it. And then there's a proxy one, because sometimes I don't agree with the other person's decisions at all, but I respect them. And I know them long enough that I can still get a shorthand like that, and I can understand an opinion and make a decision so much faster based on trusted recommendation.
Yeah, I totally concur. I think one of the massive values of these kinds of networks is getting unbiased, unvarnished kind of real world experience with some of these kinds of things. Again, these kinds of things that we have to make decisions with all the time. And just hearing, oh, well, we tried it, here's what worked, here's what didn't, and here's why that made sense for us or this didn't. Just that, vendor decisions, especially, like the vendors are very happy to tell us all these great companies using it. I can tell you, I've seen my logo on companies where I'm like, I don't know if we ever use that. Yeah, I got somebody called me recently to do a checkup on some vendor that they decided we were using. And I'm like, no, I put my name in at their booth at some conference and won a prize and never spoke to them again. Although I still get their email a lot. They're saying we use them, and I'm like, yeah.
It also is really helpful for, like, you might have an SEO VP show up to talk to a VP of engineering and say, here's this tool I used at Expedia. We're going to use this for search in the platform because it improves SEO, blah, 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 right? And you're like, maybe. I think that's my responsibility to make that decision because it's an engineering thing. But he says, no, it's my responsibility because it's an SEO thing. If you can talk to this community of other people and find out, well, what am I looking at? What's the challenge I'm facing? Because you really need to find out, like, was it painful? Did every one of your developers butt heads against the API? Did you eat it? Did you have to throw it away later? Like, these decisions, we make bad decisions all the time. So I'm really looking for warnings.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've found as this community has now grown to about 200. In the initial phase, that homogeny was very important because you want to find the person that looks and sounds like me in terms of my CTO role. I want to just know, oh, okay, there's this person, there's that person. I've found that as I hit 50 and then 100, I'm starting to play the role of, oh, okay, I'm finding out people have questions around AI. Well, let's bring an AI person in, not a CTO. Or let's bring a CISO in, or let's bring more diverse people in from a functional responsibility and experience area. And now I'm finding that the conversations are really flowing because now there's a shortcut to decision making, like you said. There's someone I can talk to right now that has been vetted by the group in a way. And hopefully that helps me CTO the shit out of things.
CTO the shit out of things.
I have a
I'm CTOing over here.
I have a founder who I worked with once who was like, man, just CTO the shit out of this, man. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but let's do that.
Well, so Etienne, you brought it up, and I was wondering if we would get a chance to talk about this because it's something that has become really important to me lately, diversity, right? So I received a job offer through a network. And my response to my partner was, wait a second, I'm a part of an old boys club. Like, I just realized, I literally got a job offer from knowing someone who knows someone. And if that group of people all look like me, then by definition, this isn't just a professional network. This isn't just a LinkedIn group. This is actually a place where people get vetted for competency or for compatibility. So it actually is more than just a nice to have. It's like, this is a hidden network. I'm not hidden, it's in plain sight. And all the networks are always trying to bring members in, but we have to do more because, it's more than just advice, which that too, in and of itself, is a resource that most folks don't get. Most CEOs aren't paying for coaching for their CTOs. And most CTOs aren't paying for extra training for their VPs of engineering. They're just expecting them to figure it out. So,
yeah, I think that, you just made the angels cry because that's what I face all the time is I just was wrestling with a CTO, a member of 7 CTOs who's actually quitting because his CEO is furious and upset and just doesn't understand why he has to pay for the CTO to do stuff that they should just be doing as a function of their role. Meanwhile, he's probably part of some let's fly to the Bahamas and parasail while talking about, this is very disparaging, but sometimes I get a little emotional about it because CTOs need to be able to articulate the value. So I absolutely need orthogonal thinking every single day. And secondly, I have to be able to talk to my CEO and say, dude, this is not a request. I'm telling you, this is what we're going to do. I need this type of network. And instead, it becomes like a hat in hand, like, oh, I would really love this. I mean, I remember the first time I put my request in to go to a conference. I mean, I thought Christmas came early when it got approved.
Yeah.
I could fly to Paris. Rounds and rounds and rounds of why I need to go, what am I going to bring back, blah, blah, blah. And I remember feeling like, wow, they did something amazing for me, is they sent me to a place where I can go learn more things to bring back to this company. I mean that's ridiculous irony. It's like,
right? Like the cost of training is so much less than the cost of acquisition. Like it's easy.
And I don't know about you. I honestly have a much easier time advocating for training for the people that work for me than I do advocating for my own training. Right? Like I can very easily develop an ROI and articulate why it's important that I include this amount of money in my training budget every year. But it's a lot harder for me to say, well, I want to spend some of that on me than I want to spend some of that on my team, especially when you're in a like kind of more of a startup environment where just having a training budget at all as part of your yearly budget is a bit of a luxury, and there's always pressure on it, right, from finance. So, I think that's always been, it isn't that I don't believe in it. It's more a question of, all right, like, would I rather say I want to spend this money on me, so I may have to tell 2 or 3 people they don't get to go to a conference this year, or would I rather have them go to the conference and then I decide whether it's worth it for me to spend myself?
That's a very
bad leadership is very expensive, I would say. It's the bad leadership can be catastrophically expensive. So
it could also just be ego. I'm like, well, I'm pretty good. I'm way better than they are.
Well, but
my job, so I'll let them.
But let's dig into that. Let's dig into that because I do find that this is a prevailing trend with people who've worked their way. I mean, I think none of us went to CTO school. We loved programming. We just became good at it. We kept on loving it, and then we started thinking about products, and then we started thinking about business, and now we're CTOs. So, what is that mindset, that limiting mindset that has us thinking those things, Kevin? Because I don't think it's ego as much as it is, and maybe you were half joking, but I just think, what is it about us that we won't promote ourselves and is it because we have a boss? Is it, like a CEO doesn't really, I mean, unless you have a board of directors or an executive chairperson, but is it because ultimately the role of CTO has a boss and the boss needs to approve? But I'm starting to think in my head to tell CTOs, you don't have a boss. You're the chief technology officer. You are the boss of yourself, of your decisions, and you're lucky to work with a great team, and they're lucky to work with you. And
I think it really is ego, and I'm going to challenge both of you here because I realized I needed to spend money to improve my skills as a CTO, one way or another, either my boss's money, my company's money, or my own money. I knew that there were things I wanted to achieve that I couldn't with the skill set I had. And actually it was working for Kevin that taught me that, because I saw him work and I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't actually know how to do the things he's doing. And I couldn't just replace him right now. Like, and that was like maybe the first time that it ever happened to me in my career where the person in front of me wasn't, because you don't think about that as your CEO. I mean, most of the time you're not like, can I replace them? And I had been CTO for so many startups where there's no one for, but then when you work for someone else, you're like, oh, wait, how are they? Oh, that's really different than the way I do it. And so for me, it was like, I'm deeply interested in getting better. And I think the two of you probably are really comfortable with your skill set being where you're at, right? Especially Kevin, you came up through multiple ranks of director and then VP of engineering and then CTO, instead of just jumping into the deep end and figuring it out.
Well, it's definitely the way I got to the role, because, it wasn't like I was 25, joined a startup, 3 years later as a CTO, and then have been a CTO for 20 years. No, I came up through the bigger companies. I moved up the ranks. So I spent a lot longer kind of at every rung up to the CTO role. But I'll tell you definitely that, I'm not comfortable with my skill set. I am constantly trying to improve it. It's just a question for me of, at any time, what's the best way? Is it reading? Is it kind of these kind of networks where I'm talking to my peers and trying to understand the challenges they're facing and try and learn from them? Or is it, actually having coaching, hiring a coach or something like that? I think the challenge has been, for me, like having worked in big companies and worked in small ones, in big companies where you have a lot more of these things that you can just take advantage of and they're just built in. It's very easy to do that, right? It's when I'm in a smaller company where there is pressure on budget, where if I'm going to have to choose, I find it much easier, and maybe this is wrong, but I generally find it much easier to say, well, again, I can pass on this right now because I think the people that work for me need it more than I do. And maybe that, I think a lot of people in our role would probably say, actually, no, that's not the best. You need sometimes you need to actually do this.
If you ask them, they would prefer that you invest some in yourself too. And I don't mean that as an insult.
No, I mean, certainly, right? So yeah, it's when there's money to spend, I'm good to spend on me. But when money's a little bit tighter, where we're just watching budget a little bit more, then I tend to say, you know what, either I can go without for a little bit in order to make sure the folks that work for me have it.
For sure.
And do you think that money to spend, do you think that networks like this should be able to exist without that financial investment? And they probably do. Like, I think there are some networks in New York, Chicago.
It's a different thing, I think. The group that I'm a member of in Seattle is entirely supported. Yeah, sorry. Actually, Kevin invited me into that group as well. When I came back from Europe the first time, but it's a coffee club and there's speakers, but it is not as fully branched out because it's very it's very aware of the time cost that everyone's contributing to it. So there's an active group, but if you're not constantly working on something related to 7 CTOs, then you're disappointing a lot of people that have expectations. So I think it's really just about the degree to which the engagement with the group is more, like, for instance, I don't have a problem talking about product and sales inside your group. I don't worry that people are going to be like, oh, you're too spammy, because we all share the need to, promote our SaaS products or whatever. I'm a lot less willing to do that in a group where everyone is kind of halfway between its personal professional development network and halfway between an expensible training activity. It feels less formal. So that lack of formality reduces your expectation. So, and it's definitely hard to maintain virtually. So
yeah, no, I agree with that. I think I'm a member of kind of local organizations of senior technical leaders in Seattle and London and Germany, as well as like on, 5 different Slacks of technology leaders that probably we're all on. And I find all of them valuable. But, for me, I think specifically because I'm the one paying to be a member, this is coming out of, my pocket. So I'm looking at it constantly with I should be getting the value. I better be getting the value out of this.
Yeah.
And which makes me way more willing to invest, where some of the others, it's a mailing list, and, I respond occasionally and I attend meetings, but it's, for everybody in that group, it is, to Ashley's point, it's we're all busy and it's kind of understanding. And so there's not a ton of engagement. It's not the same kind of level of engagement.
Think about it like you can buy Camille Fournier's book, or you can spend 300 hours reading blog posts about what you think a good first level manager should be doing. Or you can just buy her damn book for $40 and be like, oh, okay, here's a checklist. I agree with basically everything that's in here. And when you have a manager that's struggling, you can be like, here, I invested $40. Here's a book for you. Like, that works for me. I don't have a problem with, I want to invest in upskilling someone or something. And in this particular case, it's me that I want to upskill or I want to invest in. So it's a simple transaction that opens up, right? Because once you've made the commitment to spend some money, then you're like expecting it. At a minimum, it forces me to put time into it.
You're right. And that was one of the first questions I had, which was a non-intuitive thing for me in the beginning, was, hey, I want you to invest some time and money into this. And I promise you, I will keep the time to a minimal. And then someone one day said to me, no. If I'm going to pay you all this money, I don't want you to keep my time to a minimal. I want more time. And I was like, man, that is so interesting that the part of the value proposition for 7 CTOs or paid networks like this is that there's someone that's constantly giving you options to do things and attend things and participate, versus I think in the more meetup style groups, while you can have big hitters and incredible valuable moments in there, you are more sensitive to people's investment because you realize, well, just because I put the lunch out there doesn't mean people are going to show up. Whereas if it's a paid membership, it's like, oh, geez, I am showing up because I paid to be a part of this and I need to see the value.
Yeah.
This makes me shit scared, by the way. Keeping me on my toes. Constantly on my toes. So can I have a quick, just a rundown from the careers? Because I don't think people realize that, we have Nordstrom, Spotify, Microsoft. We've got all kinds of rich history represented here. Can both of you maybe in a narrative where your paths crossed and kind of just tell me how you landed to where you are today? So first of all, let me ask this. Ashley, you worked for Kevin at one point?
Yeah. So we met in Europe,
where was this?
And then we worked together in Seattle, where I worked for Kevin as a VP of engineering, and he was CTO.
And we met on a boat in Poland.
Yeah, on the Baltic Sea, a pirate ship. Actually, it was a pirate ship race as part of a tech conference, one of the larger tech conferences there in Central Europe. Kevin
which one was that?
It's called InfoShare.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It's sort of like Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, and maybe Slovenia, and some German, and then of course the Baltics, so Sweden and the rest up there, and I guess Spotify, is in Sweden.
So they invited me to speak, and I came down from Stockholm to speak at the conference.
The conversation was kind of like, okay, we've watched the Spotify videos, blah, blah, blah. So tell me what it's really like. And then I was instantly like, okay, I like this guy.
It's what I felt about him as well.
And he eventually went back to the US, was there for a while. And then when I was coming back to the US, did a bunch of interviews in Seattle. But it kind of felt inevitable that I would try to get a job with Kevin, and I was grateful that he gave me the choice. But then we got bought by a private equity firm, and
a day after he started. So it was. So I mean, from my perspective, I met Ashley and on a boat in Poland. He was working for a company there. I was in Sweden. I went back to the U.S., took on the CTO role at Avo, and Ashley's family was in Seattle, and he was looking for, I think you were back in Seattle, but you were still working for the company in Poland, right?
Yeah.
And so he was looking for a gig, and we were growing. Avo was growing really quickly, and I was at the point where I needed to like hire a VP engineering to just help me manage the team, given the growth of the team. And so I never in a million years thought Ashley would be interested, because I'm like, well, you're a CTO, and this is not like you would want my job. And I was really lucky that he was open to it.
Now I'm blushing.
Yeah, I mean, Ashley and I are very much peers. He worked for me at one point, but I very much looked at him as a peer.
I mean, I feel that way about most of the folks that I think of as peers, is that I would go work for them on, and like, if you've got an adventure, let's go do it. Just please don't let it be like, blockchain. So.
I love that, because I recently hired someone, and I got the distinct impression to work with me, and I got the distinct impression that he was like, I don't actually care what you want me to do. I just want to do it with you, which I think is one of the first times I've really experienced it, because I would just as easily work for him, and he just as easily work for me. So I think that there's something very special, and maybe we're in sort of this golden window of where we're highly sought after, we're still deeply entrenched, we're not seen as the old radicals or the outspoken, we're still very much in that employable zone for CTO, and to be able to just say, I will work with if you want me to be the director of engineering, or if you want me to be R&D, I don't care. If you want me to be CTO, I'll just do it with you, which I think is beautiful, because I can't imagine Ashley as a VP of engineering at all, actually.
It's fantastic. You get to narrow your focus, right? Like, if you have trust for the people that you're working with at the executive level, actually, one of the best things about working at Avo was they had an extended leadership team. And so I got to work with a CTO above me, who was kind of defining the vision for the entire technology group. And that was everything from infrastructure to product development. But then there were product and marketing, and they each had their VPs or their directors, and we all had a relationship. So, I had a relationship with VP of organic growth. I had a relationship with VP of paid content. I had a relationship with VP of this particular part of product development and this part of UX research. That was us getting stuff done. Right. And our managers had relationships with each other. It was very much a Spotify thing, but like not Spotify and actually better. So all credit to Kevin for introducing that bloody cult into that company at that time. I mean, it worked really well. The extended leadership relationships was fantastic. I look forward to that.
All right. So I had a part. I don't know if I can fully. I'm not going to fully take credit for it, but yeah, I was very much. We had a really. I mean, that was a company that we had a really amazing kind of group of kind of very senior leaders that weren't C-team leaders, and we were not taking advantage of them well, and me also kind of being very much in that mindset of first team kind of Lencioni style kind of groups. I'm like, these people are are closer to the work than we are in the E team. Like, we were very good collaboration within E team, but I'm like, we're too far from the work. Like, these folks need to be doing a lot more together, because they're the ones that are actually going to get the stuff done. And so, there was a lot of, we did something there. I still think we did something there, and I was happy. I think that if we'd had longer, I think that could have been.
It was pretty fantastic. And I know we're not communicating it properly, because I can see the look on your face And you're like, what are they talking about? But just, it's the most agile place I've ever worked. And I'm saying that I only worked there for 4 months. Like the time between when I started and when when we bloodlet the private equity dance that you do. And then everybody was gone at the end of that period was only 4 months. So Kevin had been there a lot longer, but in that 4 months, everything that I had ever talked about agile to anyone was in play. And we weren't using SAFe or whatever, however you pronounce the SAFE. We didn't have people with PhD rulers rapping our knuckles for violating some kind of agile structure. It was just a flywheel effect, multiple agile teams.
Which was the pods thing, right?
Yeah. But also the work is in this flywheel gear dependency. And those teams are all basically having a weekly meeting that's 90 minutes where you're looking at scrum of scrums, all the stuff that's happening in the company. And, you're moving it around on the board and everybody's identifying weaknesses and strengths. I shouldn't tell it because it's, it's your system.
No, but though I think it's better. It's better to get your kind of outsider perspective on it than, we didn't use, I think one of the things I was pretty adamant about when I joined Avo coming from Spotify is I'm not going to do Spotify. Like,
right.
If you look, because when I was at Spotify, I spent a significant part of my time other companies reaching out to me saying, hey, we're implementing the Spotify model, and me telling them, please don't do that. Like, that's a big mistake. It works great for us. Like, you're a completely different company. It's not going to work for you. Right? But take these ideas, right? And some of the ideas from it that made the Spotify model work were the org structure was whatever. It worked pretty well. But from when you see people say, well, I worked at Spotify, this isn't true. It's like, no, it wasn't true in your tribe, but my tribe, very much like the white people. Right? And the whole point of it was that every team had freedom. They had the autonomy to make the changes they needed to make them work more efficiently. So my team, because it was I ran the music part tribe, which was kind of the original tribe, the first kind of tribe. We ran very much, when I joined, we were basically the white paper, the original Henrik Nieberg white paper, and did that. And other teams, like another one of the other teams had a 4-person collaborative tribe lead role, right? So it was totally different, but that was what was working for them. The infrastructure and operations team had like a collective running it, and so different teams were doing different things.
And of course, right, like a Swedish socialist empowered collective, right? And you can't transport that to Texas. So
no,
I
mean,
like the two axes are alignment and autonomy, right? And at Nordstrom, where I also only worked for a short time, it was only a year, but it's truly one of my most favorite places to work. It's huge there. The engineering team is enormous. They had autonomy. Before I arrived, they had so much autonomy. I mean, they were ODing on autonomy. They had every known technology to man, and we're in the middle of moving to a massive multi-cloud solution so they could just get some more autonomy. It turned out that a little bit of alignment goes a long way, right? And you don't even have to do alignment with here's a standard. You can take an autonomy-based approach. You can have an open source community. You can use Git pulls and code reviews to change your process, right? Like they had this system of code reviews, design reviews, architecture design reviews that basically used checklists, but it was all community powered and it was non-confrontational, and it was a thing of beauty because basically we developed culture, standards, and discipline in our engineering operations the same way we would do a Scrum retro, right? Like we just made code, we just made pulls on the process until it got good. So
that is very interesting because when you do read those articles, like please don't do pods in your system, blah, blah, blah. It's very interesting how you just mentioned that the pods in and of themselves operated in the way that would work best for them. And so you could have the same company, same system with very different views on how to run that little agile process. And it's amazing for me, and I think, and this is in the absence, and maybe this is fear-driven, where if Spotify did it, I have to do it this way. But to just relinquish and say, you know what, their model at its core was incorporating autonomy that didn't look the same from department to department or pod to pod. And yet, whenever we read these articles, I mean, I always bookmark them because I'm like, oh shit, I have to just, because everyone's so in love with that model, I have to figure out why did it not work. And I just think that this is the problem again, full circle, with reading the 300 blog posts, right? It's just so much easier to say, Kevin, man, what worked for you guys, what didn't? And let me explain my situation to you, and then you tell me what you think. And that's a 30-minute conversation versus 30 months of agony.
I think the thing with those 300 blog posts is always going to be, why did you do it, right? So I think people get really caught up on the what did you do.
Yeah, but
right?
What was the?
Yeah. But the part they miss is why did you do it, and why is what you did a solution to the problem you were trying to solve, and what do I take, not from your solution, but from the way you approached solving the problem. And okay, I can maybe learn from what you did. Maybe I'll steal this or steal that. It's when people try and grab the whole thing and just transplant it and put it somewhere else. That's the mistake, because you're missing. The Spotify model was a very deliberate, thought through solution to a specific set of problems. And
that's it right there. Outcome versus activity.
Right? So then it's understanding, like, why did they solve it in this way, and what about how they went about solving it can I use in my company?
And we know as programmers that the bug fix 90% of that time is why does this bug exist? Like and then the next 5% is the fix. And I think a lot of times as leaders, because we haven't been trained or we haven't been groomed into our roles, we're going for those fixes. I personally find that it requires an insane amount of effort for me to figure out if the problem that I'm describing to you, A, if you are the person I should be talking to, B, do you have the expertise that you can match onto my situation? Even worse, am I describing it accurately? Where are my issues in this situation? Where am I a victim of circumstance? Where was I being an asshole? This requires an insane amount of effort. It's too much.
It's really interesting, the metaphor you make between bug fixing and process fixing, right? Because the more mature developers will pay almost no attention to the bug itself. They'll be trying to figure out, how did this bug show up in production? That's the first thing they're asking. And they have to actually use discipline to say, oh, wait, no, I actually need to focus and make sure the site comes back up. But I'm going to park this because this is really important. How did this bug get here? And that's why we do retros, right? Like, I don't know how many ops teams I've talked to. They don't actually do incident retros. And, okay, well, then you're just going to have bugs in production and nothing's ever going to get better. I think as soon as we see our role, whatever role it is, whether it's as a VP of engineering or a hiring manager or a director or a CTO, as a part of the system that has to be corrected, the easier it is to actually find a way to invest in doing it well.
So since I have both of you on the call, I just want to kind of riff on this a bit. Ashley, in terms of your short stint in that Arvo environment, what did you feel like you learned the most from Kevin as your CTO?
Oh, jeez.
I'm going to have to, I think I have to turn it the other way, because I did learn a lot from Kevin. There was one thing that I would say I captured and sort of put in a notebook and said, Kevin said this, I should do this. And that was in the process of, the bloodletting that we were doing. He was first out the door, and then I was second. But on his way out the door, I asked, how did you build such a diverse and inclusive and welcoming community, and how did you hire for that? Because everyone talks about the pipeline problem, and it's hard to overcome it, even though it's a problem of our own making. And his answer was really crystal clear, and it's still something I try to use today, which is just go to where the people are, right? Like show up at those, women who code meetups. Like if it's a welcome to men event, because some are not, but general, it's usually welcome to groups outside. And if it is, you just show up. And it's amazing how suddenly you can have so many connections with people that are great hires. And it's a lot easier to recruit them if you've actually invested in being a part of their community and get to know them on an actual level instead of just putting it on your website. So,
because
actually, what's one thing, because I feel embarrassed now. What's one thing I did that you're like, oh, I'm so glad I saw Kevin screw that up, because I've learned never to do that.
Thank you for doing this, guys.
Engineering moments before acquisition goes through.
I will be asking the same questions. What can I do better?
No, I mean, I think I wouldn't have been able to do anything else, because you don't know if the deal's going to go through. You have to keep planning for, and even when the deal goes through, you don't know that anything's going to change. So you have to plan for your future. It's the Wile E. Coyote moment where if nobody tells you to look down, you're fine. You'll get across the canyon walking on air. But as soon as someone points out, hey, that thing you were planning for that you're fully committed to, you're not standing on solid ground anymore. Then you start to lose speed and you fall. So like there's no choice in those moments except to just go forward.
Yeah,
I'm not going to give you the criticism, right? It's praise in public and then criticize privately. Negative feedback you're supposed to provide privately.
No, I created this discomfort. I apologize. Not really, but I technically apologize. But I'm actually loving this.
No, I mean, most of the things I learned from a negative point of view were own goals. But those are such good teachers, right? Like when you make a mistake that you can look back on while it's happening even and going, oh, I know I'm making a mistake right now, and you figure that out over time. You just keep looking at your mistakes. Unfortunately, the problem with leadership is that when you make mistakes, it's your teams that suffer from them. And so, none of us can be perfect leaders. But we have to, that's why we should be driven to keep trying to get better at it, because it's not just, oh, a deadline got missed or something. It's like all the people that were counting on me to be good at my job, which, sometimes is a lot. And sometimes they count on you more than they should, right? Like sometimes I remind people, hey, I just work here too. Like we all just work here. So,
So maybe can we all three maybe recall a recent mistake that we had to learn from? I can go first, give you some time to think. But I think it's so wonderfully humanizing when even just listening to some of the mistakes or some of the blind spots, because when others find out that we're also screwing up and we aren't quite this mental image that they have of us, it's such a beautiful, intimate moment when we can share in those fuck-ups. So I had a recent one. You guys don't have to do this, but I would love if you did. For those watching this is all unrehearsed. Okay, so
people are going to watch this?
I recently... No one's gonna watch this, or this is gonna go viral. Who knows? I had a recent encounter with plausible deniability that brought me way too close to the laziness that comes with a high paycheck and the willingness I had to overlook some decisions the CEO was making. But I was comfortable because I was getting a lot of money and for a fairly low engagement. And And it all came down sort of to this massive crash where the CEO went off against his own team. And in that instant where that happened, I realized I was actually part of the leadership. So I wasn't actually sitting on the Zoom call. I felt like I was one of the team. But actually, as he was burning down the house, I was actually proverbially sitting next to him. And in the subsequent weeks, I found out that the team viewed me as part of the leadership, and that I felt plausible deniability because I didn't know it was going to happen. I really didn't. But looking back, I can recall countless times where advice wasn't taken, strategy was changed, unreasonable expectations, just changing things on a whim, where if I was being true to the craft, I would have said to the CEO, you know what, dude, this is a great paying gig for me. I actually really love doing this with you. But here's my limit. Like if you're not gonna do this for the tech strategy or for the product or stick with what the team has done up until this point, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to take your phone calls and answer your emails, but I do not want to be a part of this engagement anymore. And that is your choice. And I didn't do that. And I will say I've learned one of the most powerful lessons of my career up to this point is, as CTOs, we are part of that leadership structure. And if the gig is good, how willing I was to overlook some really bad shit. And
I think
I
you're
feel
being too
bad about
self-critical. I doubt it was the money that was causing you to overlook it. I think it's you don't want to second guess your CEO too much, and you have to give them some amount of faith and trust that they know what they're doing. And it's hard to face, oh wait, maybe they don't, or maybe this is not just a few episodes, maybe this is a pattern, and that's not the problem that I encounter, but the exact same failure was not recognizing that I was part of leadership. And I can go all the way back to Avo, because like I had come up in the 90s where mergers and acquisitions happened every 3 months, right? Like every company in the late 90s, especially I was in defense and aerospace, was eating every other company. One day, and often the acquisitions were like reverse acquisitions. So your company would acquire a company and suddenly you work for GM. It's like, what? And whenever that happened, there were two things that happened. There was always blood everywhere. And there was always like a power struggle. And it totally distracted from anything else that was happening, any actual business. But you learned to see it. And then there was a special kind of takeover, which was a private equity acquisition. And a private equity acquisition was always impossible task, impossible KPIs, zero resources. And then they would burn through the people trying to accomplish that. And the ball would get moved further towards their impossible goals. So for them, it's a good system. It burns through people, but it actually does produce the profits. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue to do it. And I'm not criticizing private equity in any moral sense of the word. I'm just saying it's a difficult situation to work in. And I thought everyone else had that same kind of attitude and experience and dark humor. Like, we'll all be lucky if we have a job tomorrow, right? Well, as soon as the acquisition is announced, that's like, oh, whoa, okay, get ready, buckle up. But I'm part of the leadership, right? They're not expecting me to make morose humor about all of us losing our jobs. Yeah. They're not expecting me to be like, what do you expect me to do? I got to cut somebody. It's you, they're not expecting me to be part of the team. I'm the authority figure. So in the exact same way that you kind of had that discovery for the first time, and I think it was actually working as a VP instead of CTO, because when you're CTO, people aren't willing to give you the same amount of feedback as they would if you were VP, because you have more authority. So I have never forgotten from that moment forward that I am always in a position where, I'm not, it's not me against management. I am frickin' management, and I have been for a long time.
I think there was also with that, I don't want with that timing specifically, just also because when you came in, because you had way less context you had just as little context as everyone else, whereas if you'd been in the company already, you would have actually had way more context. And
for sure, but I think I had an implicit bias that, hey, I'm one of the team,
Yeah.
not, hey, I'm management. And
Yeah.
it was, and that's a cop out. I've had that cop out going for at least a decade.
Well, I feel like I just learned it a couple months ago. It's kind of shocking. You know, it's reputation. I mean, I actually went and upgraded my insurance and because I thought I was going to get sued, and as part of a larger suit. That none of that happened, and the company has since recovered and all that. But that was a definitely oh shit moment. Like, I am actually on this side of the table, and I'm not on the other side. Now, the anarchist in me and everyone, is like, oh, I'm, one of the team, and we're doing this, but really, you're not.
Well, when you're a founder, it's also really different, right? Like that moment of starting a company, everyone knows that, like it's high risk and it's, like fast paced and that there's collaboration, but it's different when you go into a company that's been around for a while and there are many people there who are just trying to advance their career. They're not part of some adventure where everybody's going to get an equity payout or a collapse later. It's,
Yeah, but the mistake I see founders make all the time is because when they do start the company and there's like 3 people and then 4 people and 5 people, and for the longest time, they like know everyone and they're used to everyone kind of just approaching them and asking them whatever. There's very little kind of sense of, oh, well, that's the founder. And then all of a sudden they're in a company with like 200 people and they're like, why isn't anybody like talking to me anymore? I'm just like, I'm just here. I'm just you're the CEO. And there's a lot of people who joined when you were the CEO and they're like, oh, the CEO can't talk to them.
Yeah.
I think the challenge, and this is why these kind of networks are really valuable, is I did learn, I learned a little while ago, and maybe it was because, I kind of moved up into senior management in a much bigger company where there was, when I became a director at Adobe, like all of a sudden I was on a completely different comp plan, completely different benefits package, like accessible. And it was like, there was a demarcation. Right, it wasn't just like, oh, I was here one day, and it was like I was
trumpet sound, red carpet rolls out, massages in the management club room,
and all of a sudden, like a team moved into my org, and they made a presentation to me, and I'm like, why are you presenting to me? I'm just here, and it was like this really formal. This is who we are, and this is what we do, and I'm like, this feels really strange. Like this doesn't make any sense. But I realized in that moment, oh, that's who I am now. And I need to be nodding and going and asking questions like I'm an executive, because guess what? That's what I am now. But that's why these networks are really valuable, because there is that point where, like, if you're a CTO and your CEO is standing up there saying something ridiculous, right, that you don't agree with at all, and you think is stupid, and maybe you fought with them in the E-team meeting for months about a decision, and they go up there and announce it, and you got to just sit there and go, this is great. And then you're going to go into your team meet, you're going to go into your org, and they're going to say, why are we doing this? This is nuts. And you're like, oh, here's all the great reasons why we're doing it, and this is awesome. And in the back of your head, you're like, this is so freaking stupid. I can't believe we're doing this, but I can't say that. And then, maybe with your directs, you're going to have that conversation. Like, I don't know why we're doing this. This is nuts. But you can't do that to the company, because you're the exec team. Whether you agreed with that decision or not, you got to represent it to the company. That's part of the gig, which is why having these kind of CTO networks is really valuable, because you can't talk to the people in your own company about some of these things sometimes, and you have folks you can talk to about stuff.
And you should definitely not be talking to your directs about struggles with your, no way.
But
I mean, you can't, like if
you can talk about your opinion on stuff. You just can't say like the CEO is gone off, is gone. No,
that's what I mean. Like, who are you going to talk to about it? And you also can't talk to about it at your same levels, whether you're VP or CTO, doesn't matter. Like, I can't go to the chief marketing officer and be like, oh man, the CEO, what is this thing? Like, we're not gonna, maybe it's a cloud thing and they want to do a migration and that's not part of the core business, but they came back from some conference and they're convinced that the most important thing for the company is a complete pivot to the cloud. And I mean, you didn't sign on for that. Maybe you signed on to do an enterprise database. I don't know. But the scenario is you can't undermine the new vision by creating a back channel with other folks at your level that expresses all your doubts and fears. To do that, I mean, first off, that's suicide politically. Second, you shouldn't do it, right? You need to be supportive or leave, right? Either you support or leave.
Yeah, and this is then where the work goes into how do I, in as objectively as possible, now state what happened. Because in the end, even in these groups like 7 CTOs, you still only have that person's version of the story. And then I find that a lot of times when I listen to these stories, I ask myself, okay, well, that's your side of the story. There's some confirmation bias in there. There's, victim mentality in there. There's outsourcing ownership. And so now the work becomes, and this is why I tell people, you probably also can't talk to your friends about this. You also probably can't talk to your favorite advisor about this. So now it becomes hard work to say, well, hang on, I really have to figure out where was my blind spot? How did I participate in this? How do I respond to this? And that's where, even in just the fact that you're part of a peer group, still is only 49% of the solution. The other 51% is how do I get you to accurately represent what happened? And if you're unable to do that, how do we get the peer group to now dig in their heels and say, you know what, dude, something doesn't sound right.
I mean, I think you're coming back to why it's so important to have a broad, diverse peer group. Because one of the things that I get, talking to your spouse or your friends is not helpful because you're just venting and they're going to take your side. But what I hear from communities that I belong to are, you're not used to hearing no, are you? You're not comfortable working in an environment where you have to do something you don't want to do, right? But the rest of us, that's been our entire careers. So it's helpful for me to be reminded of the ways in which I'm, just lucky to be in the situation that I'm in, and to reorient myself and say, okay, what's my obligation to this moment, right? Like not just what's in it for me or what's best for me, but I got here somehow. What do I owe this moment? Is there a level of professionalism I need to exercise? Is there some pride or principle I need to address? And are there other people who are counting on me and I made commitments to that I have to find a way to live up to? And just, coming to terms with that reality. I think you can't do that if all your peers are the same, because they're just going to be like, no, it's not your fault.
I think there's a couple things. One, being able to actually articulate this thing you disagree with and support it to your organization tends to give you at least some level of empathy towards that decision, right? So that helps. That is actually helpful because I've got to argue for something I disagree with. So which means I have to understand it, right? So I can disagree with it, but that's going to make me a lot less kind of just reactive to this decision, right? But I think also, if you're lucky in that network, you have folks who can kind of take more of a coach mentality. So when I've had exec coaches, the beauty of them has been not that they're not going to support you in that. They're going to ask you questions. They're not going to challenge you on your opinions. They're going to ask you to kind of go deeper and try and make sure you have that empathetic aspect to it so that you are understanding your own role in it. And I think with sometimes what I've done where in the aftermath of one of these things where it was just something I disagreed with and didn't go my way and was really annoying me. I've had to put some distance and then come back to it and just really just try and go through everything, just mind map all the reasons why this happened, all the things I could have done differently, all the things that I possibly reacted to. That's hard work to your point, right? But a good member of your network will kind of prompt you to at least look at it that way. But that's also finding people in your network that are experienced and have done the job for a while, right? That's always something that's critical.
Yeah, and that is all in that 95% effort that it does require to seek out, like Ashley said, diverse opinion. Like, I'm hearing all the good stuff now. What does a contrarian view look and sound like in this situation?
Right.
How much of your confidence as a technical leader is derived from a positive image that your C-suite has of you?
How much of our images comes from a positive image the C-suite has of it?
So confidence-wise, so I'm thinking, if I search my own heart,
Yeah.
and this kind of dovetails into what we just spoke about, when someone is actually confronting you and with the mirror, and you're like, I do not like what I see. Oh shit, I'm a horrible person, or I can't believe this, or I completely screwed up. How that takes an immediate hit to your confidence, right?
So reverse it. Like, think about the networks that we rely upon for good advice, so that I don't have to try to come to my own decision. You are that entire network for your CEO. Your CEO they're not asking other people in general about technical questions. They're asking you. And the minute there is any level of distrust between them and you, any of disappointment, any of hey, we weren't on the same page communication wise, any, like, what do they call it? No distance between you, right? Not even air. And the minute there is any, then they need expert advice from someone else. And that's going to conflict with whatever strategy you're trying to execute. So it's as important for your own skill to be 100% aligned, even if that means that here's a good example. G Suite Outlook. It's a decision every startup CTO has to make. Sometimes you do both. Sometimes you do one. Sometimes you do the other. But that outcome is something where your CEO is going to have an opinion about it. And you can just not freak out about that and be like, okay, we're an Outlook company. My CEO wants us to be an Outlook company. I know my developers are going to grumble, but whatever. Like, plenty of companies use Outlook. So, pick the ways in which you can support your CEO if you're going to be committed in that relationship. I have to come back to either support your peers at the management level 100%, leave, or address one of their weaknesses in a direct way. You cannot just ignore it.
But how does what you just described around trust or likability, I find that I feel confident when I feel like I am viewed favorably. I'm like, wow, he's knows all this stuff. He's made all these changes.
But what about then? They're not going to view you favorably all the time. So if you've invested,
so I'm asking you, how much of your confidence is derived from people's positive view of your decision making and leadership style? And then if you lose that, if some daylight starts forming between you and your C-suite, how does that impact your confidence? Do you just take on and I'm actually doing a personal therapy session now, so you guys are welcome to this. But as I'm a people pleaser, so I find that I thrive on the popularity of my decisions and the pats on the backs but when I sense that distance forming, I find that I lose my confidence. And so I want to know from the two of you, is that a problem you have? And I hope you don't, because then you can just tell me how to really do it. But if you do have those moments of insecurities where you don't think you have the trust of your people anymore, your C-suite specifically, what the heck do you do? I mean, do you fight to get it back? Do you start looking somewhere else? Is that sort of a one roll of the dice, really? Because this is how C-suites work. You basically are, when you lose that trust, you're out. Like how has it been for you?
I think it is. I think, probably the biggest mistakes, probably the biggest mistake I might have ever made as a CTO would have been overestimating the amount of confidence that the E-team had in my decision making. Right. So
Overestimating it.
I was, somebody in the E-team really wants something and I don't think it's a good idea. And I'm like, well, here's why it's not a good idea. And I move on, but they continue to push for it. And I just keep saying this is a bad idea. And I'm assuming because I'm the expert and I should have that level of trust, and then kind of realizing later, because I constantly, just because I kept pushing back at this kind of request, what I didn't realize is I was eroding trust with that person, and they were then arguing to the rest of the exec team that, because I wouldn't do what they wanted, and I just assumed, well, I have the goodwill of the exec team because I've always had the goodwill of the exec team. So I tell you is the problem, like execs are, and again, like it's going to depend on the exec team, but I think execs are a little bit different than normal people, right? I do think that, and I have seen this in executive teams, not with myself, but with others. Once you're out, you kind of are out, right? And I can see that if you had goodwill, it depends on what you've done, but I think if you've had goodwill and had trust and done well, and then make a mistake, you can usually kind of walk that back. But if you've lost the trust of the team, you start getting pushed out, and it becomes harder and harder.
That's why OKRs are so important, right? Because like if you have objective measurements where everyone can point and go, ooh, this person helped us achieve that number, whatever it is. Like maybe it's CAC, right? And you helped the marketing team get it. You delivered to them a ton of tools and extra resources so they could bring their cost of customer acquisition down to some number that they needed. And you did that when your OKR was something else. That executive team member who may be unhappy with their relationship with you is still going to support you in your vision because
Ashley, I think
I'm still naive about these things.
I think if they don't like you, I think, and this is kind of my point, is you kind of have a roll of the dice, and if you somehow have lost the support of your CMO because you wouldn't blah blah blah, then even if you have those delicious results, they're just gonna find a reason to get rid of you.
Yeah. So you may have the CMO, the CMO loves you, the chief people officer loves you or whatever. So you got, and you're just hearing how happy they are with you all the time. And what you don't realize is, well, the CRO is angry at you. And because you've got this love, you're like, oh, I think I'm doing pretty good. And what you don't realize is the CRO is just talking to the CEO every week, and they're one-on-one telling them all the things you're doing wrong, like all the things they think you're bad at. And you all of a sudden you find out like, oh, I'm in trouble, but at that point it's way too late, right? So
you're gonna make me quit and join an alpaca farming collective. Come on, like I have to believe that my peers, when I have struggles with them, it's just because we've lost trust and communication. And I know there are sometimes people who get under pressure and then they try to perform a political maneuvering, and that happens. I mean, shoot, that happens at the dev level as well. We witness it every day. So it's human nature, right? Like especially between DevOps and developer, right? Like especially if you've got two VPs, one that's responsible for DevOps and whispering in your ear about how mean and incompetent the product devs are, and you've got product devs talking about how trollish and unresponsive the DevOps are. I mean, like, that's your problem. You made that mistake to allow that culture to happen. So,
right.
It can happen on an individual basis for brief periods of time. But if it's happening as part of normal operating business at the E level, then I would say the CEO is doing a really poor job.
And that absolutely happens, right? So, in a lot of startups, you have inexperienced CEOs, right? They've never run a company before. And so, they may actually not, you and I any the three of us,
Yeah.
we see that happening in our organization, we put a stop to it, right?
Right.
Stop doing that and let's fix this, whatever. But you know, the CEO, this may be their first company, and they've never run a big team before.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to conflate this to just the first-time CEO. I personally think that we grossly underestimate the importance of having an advocate in the C-suite for you. So let's say in that scenario, the CMO is an advocate for you when the CRO is complaining about your decisions. And I just think that it's actually critical in the C-suite to play that game. And I think we are naturally averse to playing that game. We don't want to play that game. We want to be in Ashley's world where the results speak for themselves, man.
I mean, have you ever had a CEO do a one-on-one with you about your career or about your? I mean,
No.
I've only ever had status one-on-ones. They'll schedule the weekly meeting with you, but it's a list of shit that they want you to get done or not get done.
The CEO is not going to say, "Hey, I really want you to help develop your career and become the CTO of a larger company."
So as my CEO at AirHelp got better and better, right? This was the best thing about surviving instead of quitting, right? So this is the best thing about pushing through, because you said you think you're basically once you're out, you're out, and I'll say that's not true. I was out like 4 times at AirHelp, and Henrik will agree with this for sure. But he only ever had the eye of Sauron to focus on one bad performer at once. And so he'd focus on me as what he considered to be a bad performer. And then I would get my VP of engineering to solve it. I'd be like, okay, here, what is it that he wants? Machine learning. Okay, great. There you go. You got it.
Okay, but
me again when you want blockchain.
You're absolutely proving my point, which is you understood that the eye was on you. You understood what needed to happen.
Yeah, I gave him what he needed.
And this is what I'm saying is I'm saying that a lot of times we rather go the other route where we say, I'm making the right decisions. And like Kevin said, I have a lot of confidence that they trust that I'm making the right decisions. But really, the eye is spinning around the room. And if it falls on you, you need to have the wherewithal to say, I need to cash in some chips here. If they want AI or they want the machine learning juju, then great, just give it to them, because this is a political game. I personally know
politics involved. You got to do it.
Yeah, I personally know that bullshit requirement, but you know what? If it's going to buy me an extra 6 months or an extra 8 months, this is the game that I think gets played.
And that gave me a chance to get better at my job and watch him get better at his job. I mean, it was really cool to see him become a really good CEO. I'd go work for him again now if you're listening.
I think the point was that you had a CEO that was willing to, or you'd gained enough trust over time, so that when they saw you when you were in a bad place, they decided to try and fix it rather than to just say moving on. Again, you need to, a part of this is understanding your peers on the exec team and understanding like, okay, well, everything I'm hearing is good, so I must be doing a good job. Except I just realized I haven't talked to the Chief People Officer in 6 months.
Right. And I said no to Workday 6 months ago, and now they're still mad about it.
No, no news is bad news. I think
I'm toxic, and they're just building a case against me.
Yes.
Not because I am, just because whatever. Like, Chief People Officer is not a good example. Let me pick on a different member of the C-suite. To get on the bad side of Chief People Officer, you got to be doing something bad. Let me say the CMO. Like, for whatever reason, the CMO is unhappy with me. They're not talking to me because maybe we've had bad interactions. I'm not talking to them either. Meanwhile, they're basically, this is kind of how these teams can work. And so you need to be understanding and making sure you're connecting with every one of your peers on a regular basis. And hopefully you have a team that's also very free when they're unhappy. And you got
So just to take the abstractions out here, I think from my experience, having run 7 CTOs, the most contentious roles in the C-suite, you guys want to take a guess from your experience. I'm sure you're going to have your own.
Yeah.
The most contentious role where what you just said, Kevin, is what happens where they go quiet on you because they're building a case against you. Guess which C is doing that against you, the CTO? Most likely.
0.
From empirical evidence, it's the COO.
Okay. I'm not usually in companies with COOs.
Yeah, I was just about to say. I think
usually
it's like a geology thing. There's like a layer of different types of org charts that are common, and you're like in I think that's 3 layers of sediment below, because these days COO, CFO are one job, and it's often
so yeah,
also called
COO,
CEO.
CFO. So I would just say that is a fascinating thing. So I think that the point for me on all of this is to not be naive, that if you just do a good job, that you're going to have people support. I do agree that people will go quiet on you and they start building their case against you. It is a supremely relational thing, this thing called the C-suite. That's why the hiring takes 6 months, because they want to figure out if they like you. And the firing happens so quickly. And then I think that you need to have an advocate for you. You need to have that person that when you're not in the room, you're pretty damn sure that they're fighting for you.
I don't want to disagree with you, but I also don't think
Good.
you can't count on that. Like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for a different C-level person to spend their capital defending you. Like, I only have so much capital, and I have to spend most of it defending my team against bad decisions. So unless replacing the CMO is catastrophic for the company, as much as I might be good friends with the CMO, I'm going to have to at most times say there's only a certain level in which I can advocate for you. Because in general, if you're having trouble, you're going to have to solve that on your own. I can advocate for you a little bit, but I can't spend all my political capital. Where you get protection is the layer below. If you make sure that the layer below is very closely connected, then you will not have someone go dark and then suddenly show up with a list of complaints that you will know about it as it's going along, because your directs will be telling you that the head of organic or the Google Analytics person was saying, boy, my boss sure hates your boss. Like that's where you're going to get that intel. No one's going to advocate for you for the CEO. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to bring that to the CEO and you say, look, I know I'm having some issues. We haven't talked a lot between me and this person, so we need to get objective. I need numbers to be hitting, because when that negative information is coming to you, I need you to be comfortable that whatever the issues are, I'm still performing, right? So let's get clear on what your expectations are, because I don't want this bad relationship that we currently have, and hopefully we can push through, harm my relationship with you.
I absolutely agree that having a strong next level leadership that's well connected and well networked across the organization is an incredibly vital kind of source of information, so that you aren't surprised on that. I do think it is good to, I will be an advocate for my peers. Like how much, if I see like this is not going to happen, like this is done, like how much am I willing to throw, myself, this person goes, I go, no, I'm not going to do that. Right. But I am going to take, and I don't expect anybody else in the E-team to do that for me either. It's just not practical. When unfortunately that is the case. What I was talking about is like once it's tipped, it's kind of tipped. Ashley aside, like I think it is really hard to once you've lost that trust of the execs, you're kind of done. Like the problem is they get into this mindset, and I've seen this in a recent company, not with another exec, but with kind of next level down, where that person burned the bridge, right? And no matter what they did, it was always through this lens of, well, they're just screwed up. They're a screw up. And, well, they did this nice thing. Yeah, they did, but they're still a screw up kind of thing. And it was just over.
I don't know why people have such judgmental perspectives, like, I always like, it's a brand new day, like, okay, you've been lousy performer up until now, but I know you're committed. You can do it. And then, I get disappointed when they don't. And sure, I have to write it down. make sure and deal with this problem, and don't just keep kicking it down the road, because eventually someone's not getting better, they're not getting better. But
we're nice people.
Well, look,
within our own organization, right? Well, you're much more willing to give trust into your own organization than you are into someone else.
I'm just saying, I'm willing to reset. Like, if the VP of product and I, if we have fights for 3 weeks over the product roadmap, and then we survive it, and now we have a solid product roadmap that we're both equally unhappy with, let's go have lunch, right? And I just wanted what I wanted, right? You were in my way. It wasn't personal.
In 3 weeks, and that's not what we're talking about. Usually this is like months of.
No, and I think
that's toxic. That's just totally toxic.
Yeah, and maybe the advocacy is around you've observed what needs to be done. You have put in a technology strategy. It's not quite delivering according to initial expectations, whether those were miscommunicated or whether you've extended past some deadlines. Is there an advocate in the room that's like, you know what, I believe in the plan, let's just stick with it. I think that Etienne, I believe in the plan, let's keep pushing for that as a means of advocacy, not if he goes, I go, or not. Just keep believing. I think it's that. How have I had those lunches and those vision communications that when push comes to shove, that person is saying, I still believe in what Etienne's trying to do. So
I come back to numbers, right? Like for me, I can't imagine Mark at Avo ever losing faith in you as CTO once you converted his mindset to be sort of dub oriented, where it was like, experimenting with hypotheses that then get proven out, right? And then you can just point, look, all these things we said, A, B, C, D, they all happened, right? So,
I love that.
You're focused on the deadline thing because you're always late on deadlines. Don't ever let the conversation be about deadlines. Every technology product and every technology project has always been late. It's not about late or on time.
I'm saying there's a narrative. There's a narrative around any outcome, and so.
But that's also, to go back to that example, so Mark was a great CEO in that way, right? Like he didn't necessarily understand all this stuff, but I over time was able to kind of get him into that mindset, and then he was very cool about it. He was also a great CEO in that he would tell me, like, this isn't working and you need to fix it. So I would never get so far to that point where I'd lost that trust. You'd have to ask him if I ever did, but I never got to that point because he was also very vocal and very transparent, which was a great CEO to work for. Yeah. And also, there was times there where there was like something where I just fundamentally disagreed with the exec team and was pushing against it, where one of my peers, again, this was a great exec team because one of my peers pulled me aside at one point and said, you got to just stop. Because this is happening.
Yeah, it's not. You're not getting anywhere, and you're just spending capital.
Oh yeah, all you're doing. You're not going to get anywhere with this. We're moving on. You need to step back. And so I was also lucky in the fact that that was just a great exec team. We're not always so blessed to be on that. I think,
Etienne, when you talked about peer advocacy, that's the kind of peer advocacy I would count on.
Yeah.
You can count on your peers to tell you what they think. Counting on them to pick a side between you and the CEO, I'm not even sure that you want that. Because they shouldn't be picking you, they should be picking the side. So if you're right, they should pick you. But if it's you that's getting beat up, but not your plan, the CEO is just like, you're not delivering. I don't think your CPO should be like, yeah, but I really like him.
Right.
Right. It's a great reframe. The peer advocacy is Kevin being pulled aside and someone saying, hey, dude, I think that horse is thirsty. It's on the floor. Get it some water, but because that horse ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
I am trying to speak American more, like ain't going nowhere.
Good for you. I'm trying to speak more European. I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of my words had U's in them instead of, I say color, but with a U in it. It's hard to tell, but that's just because I was in the UK for.
But do me a favor, though.
Yes,
do me a favor.
I was in Germany in Europe from '97 through 2000. Was that when y'all was in Europe?
You were there way longer.
3 years. Okay, I can add.
When were you there? I was there from '97 to 2000. You guys?
I was just there, like 2016, 17, and 18.
Oh, what I mean is when you lived there.
Yeah.
That's when you lived there. Was just recent.
2013 to 2016, and then 2019 to earlier this year.
That's right. You actually had already taken the job when we met, but had not told your team yet. So you were like, shh, you can't tell anyone. I'm going back to Seattle. Yeah.
I forgot.
So just
right.
put a pin in it. Where is the healthy mixture then between naivete that the C-suite will sort things out versus not naivete, sorry, but the what should a CTO be doing just to make sure that you are in fact securing or positioning yourself to keep your job when the results might not be speaking as loudly as you naively might hope, versus this incredible toxic environment where you're going to get fired regardless? Like, what is and I ask this because I think a lot of CTOs, especially newer ones, are thinking, hey man, my results will speak for themselves. This is, or no one's questioning me. They're always like, this is amazing.
I would go back to the deadline thing being a mistake, right? Don't let any of the performance things be binary. Don't let it be I'm late or I'm on time. Let it be a continuum, right? There has to be a continuum. And so that's why OKRs are good, because there's a range of things that you're working on a quarterly basis to contribute to an annual goal as an E-suite, right? Like that's what you have to get established as a set of values. And if you can't, you're always going to be delivery only, and you're going to be cost and delivery is always late. Like delivery is always late. There's not a company anywhere in the world that's ever on time for any sustained period of time. So every project, that's the point of risk. Like some projects come in early and under budget, and other projects come in late and over budget, but no one remembers early and under budget. So you only get judged by late and over budget. Okay, it happens, but there's a continuum. New revenues arrived because of features we put out there. Was it as much as we wanted? It's 75%. 2 weeks late produces 75%, like.
So due diligence in this space could be, hey, fellow C-suite member, I feel like every time I bring this up, there's like, I'm open to, what do you think? Like, what is your feedback? Is there something that I should know that maybe people aren't telling me? Is that the type of keeping the soil fertile action that a CTO could take to solicit feedback?
Yeah, I think that communication is critical. I agree with Ashley. I agree and disagree with Ashley. I agree with Ashley that you're always going to end up with, the exec team's always going to put more aggressive goals than you're ever going to achieve, right? So you're always going to be late, this, whatever. And you can argue, there's no way this is possible, but in the end, you're just going to get handed something, and maybe you hit it, maybe you don't. But delivery they look to us for delivery, right? So you need to either be delivering, or you need to have way in advance and have prepared the ground along the way. This isn't looking, just so you know, like, I don't know if this is going to come in, but this is what we've done thus far. This is the value we brought to customers. This is the results we're getting. I'm going to sit in, depending on kind of company, I'm going to sit in on the sales call. I'm going to sit in on the product support. If we've disappointed a customer, I'm going to step in. So I'm not leaving you, right? I'm taking responsibility for it. So that's what they're looking. That's what folks look for. Deliver. If you're consistently not delivering, you're going to get fired. Mm-hmm. You got to deliver, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what we're paid to do. But
can we take a detour?
Hold on a sec. Being along the way, being just hyper transparent at every stage of the process, and actually doing the work to work cross-functionally and make folks aware of what you're doing, so that it's not like they disappear and then they're late and we don't know what's going on. To make sure like what your team is doing is super visible. That's critical. I think that'll, as long as people understand, we get it. Like, we thought this was going to happen, it didn't, but we know why. I think they're a lot better. And also that you personally are taking responsibility for that and whatever the implications. So you're not leaving your peers out to dry. Like, that's another important part. Sorry, Ashley, go ahead.
No, it's what you're talking about. So I was part of a project at a large company where it was mandated by the board that a certain thing would happen in a certain period of time. And the technology project was given to me, this has to happen, go make it happen. Yeah. And it was a $5 million cost project. And along the way, there was one senior director of engineering who had another project that they were working on, which was an upgrade to our payment system, our order management system. And they said, no, like, I'm not going to be able to do this new project that you are needing me to be a part of and also maintain this other goal that's very important to the company. And I was like, yeah, but they said it has to happen. And she was like, no, it can't happen. And so there was some back and forth, and eventually it was like, okay, well, let's make a presentation and then change the board's mind based on the content that you've got, why it can't happen. And I'm looking back on that and realizing that her position as a senior exec, as a woman, is very different than my position as a man. So in her shoes, I would have said, sure, because the consequences for failing would have been, at least at the senior director level, I still could have made VP if I had failed to do one of those two things, because everybody would have known the thing we were trying to do was impossible to begin with. So if we accomplished half of what we set out to do, I'd be rewarded. But she had struggled to get there against the same biases that every other woman in engineering struggles with. And she had the experience and confidence to know that saying yes to me was a trap. Like, my goal was get this impossible project done. I wasn't related to the payments thing. If that failed, that's not my problem. I mean, I wasn't thinking of it that way, but seeing the difference between the way in which we get measured in performance based on being part of the in-group where failure is more tolerable, or even getting fired is more tolerable, right? Like, it's a lot easier to get a job being me than it is someone else. So the advice you're giving, I'm thinking, first off, I don't think I could do that. I couldn't succeed following the advice that you're giving about careful, maintained warnings, because it seems like people just kind of ignore the warnings that I give them. When I say this project might be late, they're like, yeah, we know, but we believe in you.
They're saying this project might be late, and then they're saying, this is what we've done, this is where we're going, this is why this is, and making sure they understand it as non-technical people. Right. That's the other part, is we say, well, we misconfigured Istio and it ended up causing this issue and it's put us back a week. And because of that, whatever. And they just hear back a week. Right. And it sounds like an excuse to them. But you actually need to follow up and go, this is why we needed to do it this way. This is why that happened. This is what we're going to do differently to fix it. This is how we're going to try and make up the time so that they understand.
That part. That's the mistake, I think, to make up the time. So shouldn't do it. Like, Etienne is a people pleaser. So if he tries to correct along the way, I mean, you said it earlier. If you try to correct along the way by saying, we're going to rescue my mistakes, I'm going to fix it,
But not taking responsibility for saying, yeah, this set us back a week and we're going to be late a week. Nobody wants to hear that. What they want to hear is, this set us back a week and this is how we're either going to drop this to make that date, because that is you solving the problem. So I think your point around empathy for the person and their specific issues or their specific situation is really important. I think, though, it's also empathy for the role, because we're judged by different metrics, right? So me as CTO, I am judged very differently than the CMO or the CRO or the CFO. Right. And so to understand that when I'm talking to the CFO and saying this is going to delay delivery by 2 weeks, what they're thinking is our projections on revenue for the year that I've committed to the board are now broken.
Yeah.
And I'm the one that's going to get in trouble with the board because now we're not hitting our revenue targets. Or the CRO is going, I need to sell this to customers. I need this to make sales. And I'm committed to a number. And now you're telling me that I'm bonused based on hitting that number. You just told my entire organization they're going to lose money out of their paycheck.
I mean, you just explained why CMOs and VPs of sales hate CTOs in the first place, is because, like when we're late, it's costing them personal income.
Right.
So like that level of empathy is so important.
Yeah. So that's why, like, I truly love and believe Agile. And have done for 1,000 years and try and build agile and lean organizations. But also just building a lean and agile technology product development organization while the rest of the company pretends like it's 1990 is an absolute disaster, because you're just setting up all your peers to fail. And you're like, whatever, we failed. Failure's awesome.
Right.
And you're like, I'm getting fired, or I can't buy the car for my kid because I was expecting a bonus based on selling this feature that you didn't deliver and you don't care about.
So I come back to OKRs, because basically you're connecting 2 weeks late is money. So if you acknowledge you can't fix 2 weeks late, but you can probably fix money, right? Like you can probably fix the missed revenue. You can do something somewhere else better. You can, increase the visibility around documentation so that the sales team gets better training and can close more deals. Like, I think trying to fix the uncertainty around estimates by just working harder, it's foolish. And only if you have a ton of trust from your CEO can you get through that.
It's not about working hard. It's not about saying, although to be honest, like if you're in that kind of situation, which a lot of companies are, right? A lot of companies are in this situation where technology is like, we're doing what we're doing, and the rest of the organization's like, well, we're committed to a number.
Yeah.
And we are bonused or fired based on hitting that number. So they have very little sympathy for this kind of thing. If you're really good, you can convince the entire E-team to kind of work in this way. If you're not good, or you're just enjoying a company that's already working this way, you actually have to figure out so that it doesn't feel like you're not accountable. Like, that's the critical thing they want to hear from you is, I understand, like, look, this happened. I understand it happened. I'm accountable for it. It may be, they would love to hear, we're going to work late for 2 weeks so that we make our commitment. Like, they want to hear that you are serious about your commitment. It could also be, we're going to drop this feature. We're still going to get this product out the door. We're going to drop this feature. We believe it's fine, right? So they want to just hear a plan that you just don't go, we're late and that's fine.
I agree. I think you have to have empathy for whose KPIs or OKRs you're having an impact on, and then go to them and say, so what's going to happen? I'm starting to feel like we're going to be, a quarter late on delivering some technology project. How bad is that going to be for you in SEO?
I think that's so good.
Overcome this, and then that's another way you build allies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Showing empathy in the situation, a massive way to build allies.
I think this is the money shot, guys. This is so good. I think recognizing
Please delete that part.
You're showing your Southern California-ness there.
That's not even we don't say that word in American English anymore.
Oh, really? Okay.
Not in a work-related environment.
Sorry about that.
That's the valuable part of the conversation.
That's the valuable part. No, I think that's this hard work to get to this point, but you've definitely helped me understand that how is my work affecting the KPIs of my fellow C-suite, and how do I have empathy for that? How do I, like you said, Ashley, how do I sit with them and say, how does this impact your success, and how am I making you, and understanding that role of CTO is in support of the roles and results of the other C-suite roles. And then I think that is that is an incredible skill to have, even with your CEO.
I'm terrible at it. Well, to be honest, I know I need to do it, and I lose focus, right? Because I'm so inwardly focused on tech and product, and I absolutely lose focus that everyone else is like entirely dependent on that outcome, and so I'm always just like, what difference does it make? I'm measuring my speed, like I'm measuring the speed and capacity of my team because I'm always trying to play a long game. I'm never trying to hit some monthly or quarterly revenue target. I'm trying to build a capacity that can grow. And then someone comes along and is basically like, yeah, you're going high speed, but you fucked my bonus. So they're very unhappy,
Well, and I think that's where my earlier point, the confidence starts tanking because you feel like people are like you're not delivering. You're the black sheep of the sea. Like you're just not getting shit out the door. Like Kevin with the delivery, we have to deliver as CTOs, software delivery.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why it's never the CTO ringing the bell on the NASDAQ, because we're a cost, right? Like even when we're performing at our maximum agile capabilities, unless you're purely a tech company like Twilio or something, where your product is technology, then as a CTO. Avo's a good example because there is a product there and technology produces it, but it's going to be the chief product officer or the chief marketing officer or the CEO who's in the articles. It's not about the CTO.
Yeah. So I think that just to put a bow on it, can I say put a bow on it, or is there a question about what it is?
No, that's fine. Putting a bow on it is fine.
Go on.
To the CTO's under fire, the CTO who's overworked, isn't delivering, is the black sheep. Maybe a delicious level set is how can I build empathy for my peers in the C-suite? How am I making them succeed? Be aware of how I'm making them fail and start owning that. Like you're owning it. There's accountability. It's not just we are late. It's like, and the second part of that conversation is this is how we come back from that, or this is how we fix it, so that there's that level of accountability. But I think that honestly for me has been a very interesting bit of a reframe. How do I, in my first days on the job or in my whatever state the company is in, my focus goes away from myself and immediately to my peers in the C-suite. How do I bring them back to success? How do I bring success to everyone's KPIs?
The thing I'll also say, I mean, like the difference between like a great exec team and a crappy exec team. And a great exec team, the sales is missing their target and everyone kind of rallies around the sales team, right? What can we do? Oh, can we do more here? Whatever. A bad exec team is everyone just like, I hit my metrics, sales team screwed up, but that's not my problem. That's their problem, right? And if you're in one of those good exec teams, technology misses something or hits something, and everyone just goes, okay, cool, like how do we adjust and whatever. A bad exec team is they're like, you screwed up, now I can't do this. And it's the finger pointing exercise, right? So this is where I go back.
And it's so logically avoidable because the cost of the short-term change, right? The cost of getting rid of Kevin and replacing Kevin in terms of productivity, or Linda, or whoever it is like so much more expensive than whatever problem that they currently have. Right. Like, and it's kind of the same with CMO. If a CMO messes up for a single quarter and has CAC twice as high as it is, like, okay, maybe replacing them is needed, but going without a CMO for a quarter or two is equally dangerous. And are you sure about that next level bench? Like, so sometimes it's really important to recognize people make mistakes,
This is actually making a mistake and kind of fundamentally losing the trust of your peers, right? Like, I think everyone gets to make a mistake. It's when and again, this I think comes down to attitude. I've seen this more be a problem with attitude than I have with screwing up, which is I screwed up, but people don't feel I'm being accountable for it, right? or taking the impact to them seriously. That's where I think you lose trust, because people believe you don't care.
And I do think, absolutely, and I do think that specifically if we address the CTO, that they are guilty many times of perpetuating that. Well, it's technology. I can't help. It's no estimates. You can't. Blah blah blah. It's like, no. You know what? Just show up. Put on that sort of adult view of it, and let's do this. Because as a software engineer, you can kind of, there's a lot that you can get away with because people just simply do not understand what you do. And I realize that a lot of times in C-suite, people don't really know what the CTO does. I mean, if I was...
Yeah.
So this was delicious. Is there any closing thoughts? I mean, I feel like we did the hard work to uncover a nugget. Any feedback for me on how this could be better next time? It's being recorded, by the way. Will be published.
I mean, I love the conversation that we got to have about the Agile org, because for me, I actually didn't realize that trash fire of an experience I had working for you while we were being acquired was also a place where I had my very best view into what, sort of Agile nirvana looks like. Yeah. We had a lot of it at AirHelp, but we never got fully flywheeled at every level. And I guess you could have done better with your sales team there. Like the thing I really wanted to jump into at Avo was, how do we take those outbound sales guys, the folks doing all the phone calls, and connect them into the same data stream so that they're getting this feedback kind of NPS style data that helps them become a part of that aligned feedback. So
anything I said about CRO, I wasn't speaking specifically about any company, because actually I thought the CRO we had at Avo was actually quite good.
Oh yeah, no. I'm for sure. Yes. To be clear, all the execs at Avo were great. I love them all.
But I think I'm glad that you had that experience, because it was a crummy. I'm fully cognizant that was a pretty crummy experience. It wasn't the plan, obviously. That was never the plan, but. Yeah, I'm glad that you at least got some value out of it.
I got an MBA out of it, right? 4 months worth of education, 2 years worth of education, and 4 months of challenges. So,
right, be my new business and get you an MBA in 2 months.
Okay, gents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for giving me a chance to talk to Kevin again.
Let me end the broadcast, but don't go away.
Okay.